described on his website as a message for the nations to tear down the walls of racism, sexism, denominations, segregation, etc., and to come together as one. He says on his website, we don't have to agree, but we need to show love. We want you to turn your attention to the screen. The committee members, you can have your seats, but we want you to realize this is our response to that hate mail.
Are y'all ready to tear down some walls? Todd Curry and Focus, back at you. Let's go! Tear down the walls. Yeah, that separated us for so long. Saints of God, we need to tear down the walls. Fulfill my call. Come on, focus, say, tear down. Tear down the walls. Yeah, the walls of division and even those inward walls. Come on, tenors, help me say. Tear down, tear down, tear down. We've got to tear down these walls that are hindering our growth and prosperity. These inward walls that are destroying us. The outward walls that's causing separation. God created us as one race, the human race. We've got to come together as one for His glory.
All denominations, segregation, cliques and affiliations.
That's our response. Thank you. Next, we will have introduction of the speaker by one of our committee members, our own Ms. Joyce Harbert Smith.
Good afternoon, everyone. On January 4th, 2012, Dr. Barbara Seals Nevergold was appointed an at-large member of the Buffalo Board of Education. She served as the president of the board from July 2013 to July 2014. In May 2014, she was elected to serve a 5-year term ending in 2019. She was elected to serve as president for a second term in July 2016 and again in July 2017. She is an active participant in many of the district's task groups and committees. Dr. Nevergold also serves as the treasurer of the New York State Conference of Big Five School Districts, a statewide advocacy group representing the large urban school districts. In 2017, she was elected to serve on the executive committee of the Council of Great City Schools, a national organization that serves 68 urban school districts across the country. Dr. Nevergold is a graduate of Buffalo State College. She received a doctorate degree in counseling education from the University at Buffalo. Dr. Nevergold is a lifelong educator who taught in the Buffalo schools, the University at Buffalo, and Friendship House, and Berkshire Farms, foster care and adoption agencies, and was the CEO of County Incorporated. Dr. Nevergold has received numerous awards, and I won't read all of them, but some, for professional and community service, including Distinguished Alumnus Award from Buffalo State College, the New York State Women of Excellence in Education Award, the New York State Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Humanitarian Award, and Western New York Women's Hall of Fame, and so many others. At this time, I'd like to present to you Dr. Barbara Nevergold.
The power of love, building bridges, tearing down walls. I did not recognize it as the origin as a quote from Dr. King. However, as someone who is passionate about history, I love researching. I've worked on my family's history for over 30 years, and also on the history of African Americans in Buffalo and Western New York. I was intrigued about the genesis of this quote, and I wanted to understand the context in which Dr. King had made it. Given what I thought would be a simple task to look up this quote, I resorted to that modern-day tech research strategy that most of us use, Google, yeah. Some of us on a daily basis, so I Googled it. But to my surprise, Google did not lead me to the origin of this quote. Then I resorted to scanning a number of Dr. King's speeches that are online, but I still didn't find the origin of the quote. So today I ask any of you after this, in this luncheon, if you know the origin of the quote, please let me know, because I don't have the answer yet to that question. Nevertheless, my internet search did lead to several versions of this quote. Most are short, simply reading, "Let's build bridges, not walls." And I learned that many people have used this expression, including Pope Francis and UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Some books have been written with that title, such as a 2015 self-help book by Jon Stewart on interpersonal communication. And of course, I found you can buy products like t-shirts and cups, etc., with the slogan. However, I didn't find that video, and I wished I had, because I could have been tearing down those walls. But anyway, I also found a lot of statements in which people had elaborated and on Dr. King's words as obvious adaptations of the quote. But regardless of the various formats, it's clear that Dr. King originated a meaningful statement which embodies a message that is profound in its simplicity and durable in its longevity. A message that has universal appeal. I'm sure it's been translated in many other languages. And the timeliness that is relevant today as the day he uttered it. And as an educator, I can hardly contain myself in imagining all the powerfully instructive ways this saying can be used to teach children about the benefits of working together to promote understanding and unity. And it's so good to see so many children here today. While today's occasion is to honor and celebrate the man whose life began on January 15th, 1929, this year will also mark another milestone. But I don't want to focus on that tragic incident. I do want to address another significant event involving Dr. King that took place 50 years ago in Buffalo, and follow up then with some reflections on Dr. King and the current state of education. Just 5 months before his assassination, Dr. King spoke at Kleinhans Music Hall in Buffalo. The date was November 9th, 1967. Dr. King's visit was sponsored by the University of Buffalo's Graduate Student Government. Last November, members of the original organizing committee and community members who attended the lecture commemorated the occasion. The title of Dr. King's presentation was, quote, "The Future of Integration." He spoke extemporaneously, and there's no transcript of the speech, although an audio tape is maintained in the UB archives. During his speech, Dr. King reaffirmed his unshakable belief that violence as a way to achieve racial justice is both impractical and immoral. In 1967, for those of you who were around and those of you who weren't, you can Google it, 59 race riots. In fact, a riot in Buffalo from June 26 to July 1st resulted in 180 arrests, 60 injuries, and $250,000 in damages. Governor Rockefeller actually recruited Jackie Robinson to come to Buffalo to help to resolve the conflict. While Dr. King focused on his opposition to violence as a means for bringing about change, he also was clear to identify the conditions that provoked violent behavior. Violent revolts grow out of revolting living conditions, he said. Violence is the language of the unheard. Furthermore, he stressed the belief that summer riots were caused by winters of delay, and underscored the point that Negroes did not create slavery, slums, or unemployment. Dr. King also questioned whether the nation would ever defeat poverty or save its cities. In addition to speaking about the racial violence engulfing urban communities, Dr. King's topics also included the importance of education and voting to the Black community. He stressed that the ballot is one of the keys to the door of freedom, and that those who have no vote are powerless. Black voters, he said, should use their vote to move their agenda forward and get out of their economic trap. Finally, he addressed a topic of great importance to his UB supporters, his opposition to the Vietnam War. He condemned the government for being more concerned about funding a foreign war than funding domestic programs at home. Now, I was perplexed that so little detail was given on Dr. King's remarks about the importance of education. What did Dr. King have to say about education? And for that matter, what did he say about the future of integration? Dr. King formulated his beliefs about the purpose and goal of education at an early age. He was a brilliant student who was accepted at Morehouse College when he was 15 years old. At the age of 18 in 1947, he published an essay entitled "The Purpose of Education" that is founded on his educational philosophy. He wrote, "The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically." He added, "We must remember that intelligence is not enough. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education." And he maintained this philosophy throughout his life. Dr. King went on, refined and updated presentations he entitled "The Future of Integration," beginning as early as 1959. He also spoke on the same topic at Penn State in January 1965, and on March 17, 1966, at Southern Methodist University in Dallas. In these speeches, Dr. King reminded his audiences about the history of racism and discrimination from slavery to the present day, citing the various civil rights movements of the time and their incremental successes. We have come a long, long way in the struggle for racial justice, but he cautioned, but we have a long, long way to go before the problem is solved. He elaborated for his Buffalo audience, "It's a fact that we've come a long, long way, but it isn't the whole truth. And I'm afraid if I stop here, I will leave you the victims of an illusion, wrapped in superficiality, and you may go away tonight the victims of dangerous optimism. Dr. King may have made the same pronouncement about progress in education. At the time of these speeches, his remarks about education revealed what seems to be a prescient understanding of the future influence of technology in educational curricula. He observed that the problem of educational equity was becoming more complicated because of automation and cybernation. I believe they had that word in 1967, cybernation? They did. He said, quote, "The Negro has been denied educational opportunities in many instances, for example, in access to apprenticeship training." Where are my Union of Black Trade folks? You heard that before, right? Okay, thank you. So, again, the Negro has been denied educational opportunities in many instances, for example, in access to apprenticeship training. He went on to say, "And so for this reason, we have often been limited to unskilled and semi-skilled labor. These are the jobs that are passing away today with the impact of automation, and it is making for great unemployment," unquote. He also lamented the failure to address poverty and its subsequent ramifications on our educational system. So, a half-century has passed since Dr. King's assessment, and what can we say about our educational system? Like the 60s era, we're living in a challenging, disturbing, and uncertain time. We are experiencing unprecedented national dissonance characterized by divisiveness, anti-immigrant sentiments, religious and racial intolerance, the normalization of unacceptable behavior and language by powerful leaders, and the proliferation of technology that provides instruments of anonymity which allow unfettered dissemination of hateful rhetoric. And against this backdrop, elevating the significance of today's theme, we are exposed to the ongoing campaign by the President of the United States to build a real brick and mortar wall that threatens to separate and divide us physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And if I can go back for just a minute to Dr. King's remarkably timely statement from his 1947 paper, he wrote, quote, "To save man from the morass of propaganda, in my opinion, is one of the chief learn the true from the false, the real from the unreal, and the facts from fiction." So let's keep that in mind when we hear the breaking news stories or the tweet of the day. I began my career in 1966 as Buffalo was launching its school desegregation movement. It was a time of optimism about the positive impact of integration on our educational system, even as Dr. King was raising questions about inequity in the system. I've spent 50 years in various classrooms throughout this community, the last 6 in the Buffalo Board of Education's boardroom. And some of you have been there with me because I talked to a few people who said, "I see you on TV." So check us out. As a member of the Buffalo Board, I have experienced firsthand how difficult it is to guide or change a complex system that is manipulated by powerful outside forces and internal constituencies. The landscape of public education has changed. It's a multi-layered system that is regulated by federal and state mandates in addition to the dictates of local stakeholders. It's a system under tremendous stress from individuals who would like to dismantle it and privatize it as a business. The reform movement has interjected charter schools, voucher programs, homeschooling, virtual schools, and other technological educational formats, in addition to traditional parochial and private schools into the system. The result is a smorgasbord called choice of educational options that are not necessarily efficient or successful alternatives to public schools. In addition, the movement promotes competition as a pedagogic panacea to fix problems of academic achievement and inequity. Over 50 million, or 91% of the children in this country, attend public elementary and secondary schools. Half of these children are children of color. Student demographics also include an increasing number of immigrant and refugee children, children who are not English language speakers, economically disadvantaged children, and children with special needs. The problems we face today are not just problems of the large urban school districts. I looked at the statistics for Dunkirk, for example. You very much mirror many of the same issues I've just raised regarding urban school districts. In addition, many parochial as well as charter schools and private schools are struggling with factors that contribute to unacceptable student achievement, such as inadequate parental engagement, poor student attendance, severe behavior problems, health problems that impact cognitive ability, trauma, poorly prepared or disaffected teachers, and lack of educational professionals at all levels for that matter. Further, we have a system that has institutionalized inequity through the one-size-fits-all standardized testing system that the state uses to label our children and our schools as failing. Dwindling budgetary support from local, state, and federal governments impact a district's ability to meet the needs of their student population, purchase educational resources like technology, maintain and upgrade infrastructure, and hire, train, and retain diverse staff. New York State has a $4.4 billion deficit, as I'm sure all of you who are in politics are aware of. We've got to close that this year. And all the changes in the federal tax law, we should all be concerned about how that will impact the state's contributions to school districts. This year's federal budget also proposed cutting monies to programs that benefit the most vulnerable children, that is, after-school programs and summer programs, nutrition. As dire as the foregoing sounds, educational researchers tell us that poverty is the major factor contributing to poor educational outcomes, especially for urban children. Poor children begin their educational career disadvantaged. Poor nutrition impacts health and cognitive development. Lack of exposure to educational stimulation diminishes self-motivation. Studies report that poor children hear 30 million fewer words than their more affluent peers, and they start their education with that gap, a gap that's hard to close as they age. In the last years of his life, Dr. King was prophetic in focusing on the problems of systemic poverty. The impact of poverty on school achievement is pervasive and crushing. The single most powerful predictor of racial gaps in educational achievement is the extent to which students attend schools surrounded by other low-income students. In other words, a diverse student population is a positive asset to learning. Socioeconomic status does matter. 64 years after Brown versus Board of Education decision struck down the separate but equal doctrine, researchers have documented an increase in the number of high-poverty schools serving predominantly Black and brown students. It's a trend that appears to signal return to the segregated schools that the Brown decision was supposed to end. Some educators have identified education as a civil rights issue of our time. As far as I'm concerned, education has always been a civil rights issue. Now, I can tell by how quiet this room is that you're taking in all of this. So let me just put a pin in right here and say, because I suspect that this is depressing, demoralizing news to some of you, but let me say that what I just identified to you are the walls that we need to tear down. Yes, there are walls that are long-standing, there are walls that are high, there are walls that are soundly constructed, and there are walls that are seemingly impenetrable. But there is good news. Bridge building is underway. Did you hear me? Bridge building is underway.
Yeah.
As a school board member and as an educator, my focus has been to advocate for equity for all children in our system, to advocate for enhanced resources, to resist the assaults that undermine public education, and to vigorously oppose the people leading the charge. Public education advocates across this nation are engaged in proactive strategies to push back against a reform effort that threatens to strip resources from our schools and resegregate them. The fight against the devastating effect of poverty on the education of our children is at the forefront of our determination to maintain a quality, equitable public education. Early childhood and pre-kindergarten programs engage children as early as 3 to increase early literacy and reduce that 30 million word gap. Extended day and summer school programs help children to maintain and enhance prior year learning. Restorative justice programs have been proven to reduce behavior problems leading to suspension and are instrumental in interrupting the school to prison pipeline. The opt-out movement has pushed back on standardized testing that is unfair and not true measures of mind, body, and spirit. We have instituted professional development training for teachers that is not just cultural sensitivity training, but develops cultural competency skills. Those are the skills necessary to implement, to support teachers, to recognize their importance as professionals, and positively impact the teacher shortage problem. The school is becoming the one-stop community center where families can get assistance from a range of resources to address multiple concerns, including health, mental health, nutrition, housing, employment, education, and much more. We're using a toolkit of diverse approaches to mitigate the impact of poverty because we know that unless their basic needs are met, children cannot concentrate on higher learning educational goals. We invite parents to be significant partners in their children's education and to develop meaningful engagement strategies so that we can accomplish this goal. Now, I would be remiss in not noting that my own district, through the strategic plan our superintendent and board calls the new education bargain, is systematically addressing all of the above with a goal to reduce the inequities in the district and increase opportunities for student academic success. But you know what? Bridge building is hard work. But bridges span untraversable terrain. Bridges connect people to places and other people. Bridges reduce divides. And if constructed right, bridges can withstand severe stress and support tremendous weight. Let me say this again. Bridge building is hard work. We're doing it. One pylon, one pier, one strut. And personally, I believe that most of us are working lovingly to build those bridges as our actions are reflected in language that encourages acquiring knowledge to reduce fear and misunderstanding of the other, working collaboratively and cooperatively, it's expressing mutual respect and regard, and accepting differences. We're making positive strides in education, but we are mindful of Dr. King's admonition. We've come a long, long way, but we have a long, long way to go. So I want to quote one other adaptation that I found of Dr. King's words on the internet. And this one says, "Let us build bridges rather than barriers, openness rather than walls. Rather than borders, let us look at distant horizons together in a spirit of acceptance, helpfulness, cooperation, peace, kindness, and especially love." And then let me end with an anecdote on a personal nature. I didn't attend Dr. King's presentation in November of 1967. And to be honest, I can't remember that him coming to Buffalo at that time. I don't remember that particular event. But Dr. King was at a different place in his life at that point. He was focusing more on his anti-war crusade. He was focusing more on his anti-poverty crusade. And he wasn't particularly received warmly in Buffalo by the people you would have thought would have received him, that is the other ministers, the other leaders of the black community. They were a bit skeptical of him at that point and resistant to his opposition to the war, his anti-war. My own father was a minister, and while he was supportive of Dr. King, he was not supportive, of the anti-war movement. And so we didn't go to hear Dr. King. As I said, I didn't really recall very much about him coming at that time. But also in November of 1967, I was a novice teacher. I was starting my second year teaching at Southside Junior High School, French teacher, teaching junior high school. And the school was a school that was built specifically to enhance or to be part of the desegregation movement. It was a brand new school, opened in 1966. And so in November 1967, I was preparing for my own, I think, integration experience. I was getting ready to get married to a Caucasian man. And now, while my husband and I we didn't consider ourselves to, be revolutionaries or anything, even though the Supreme Court had just struck down, the law barring interracial marriages in 1967. And we got married in December of 1967. But we weren't ignorant of the fact that we were, kind of doing something that was unique. But again, I think in terms of responding to Dr. King's The Future of Integration, we certainly saw integration as being the positive, as being the thing that was going to lift this country out of the woes of discrimination, the problems that we have suffered since slavery was instituted, and unfortunately seem to be back suffering that now. But at any rate, I said we didn't see ourselves as revolutionaries, but we did get married. We have 2 wonderful children. We have 4 wonderful grandchildren. And this past December, we celebrated 50 years of marriage.
All right.
So maybe we were a little revolutionary after all. But I mentioned it because my husband is very supportive of everything I do, and I wanted to mention it because he drove me down today, and we also were accompanied by our 2 granddaughters, Naya and Nairi over there. But, I hope that you, in terms of the gist of the presentation, as I said, I said a lot of depressing things at the beginning of this program because it's important, as I said, if we don't identify, what we need to tackle, we will not be able to tackle it. So I wanted to identify the walls as depressing as it sounds, as difficult as it sounds, because when we identify them, then we can tackle them and tear them down and build the bridges. The other thing that I want to say before I take my seat is that someone from a radio station interviewed me just before this program, and he asked me about the Buffalo schools and what's happening there, and how do we deal with all the issues that we encounter. And as I said, Dunkirk is not different. A lot of the same issues are being encountered all over. But what I find is that we tend to focus so much on the negatives, on the problems, that we don't spend enough time celebrating the good things. There are a lot of positive things going on in the schools. We have wonderful students. They're doing fantastic and phenomenally. And we need to, as we are tearing down those walls, that separate us, those walls that are examples of discrimination, examples of the impact of poverty and all that I referenced in this presentation. We also need to lift up and celebrate those children and those programs, those teachers, those individuals who are making a difference because they're out there. And as long as we focus, on the negative, it takes us away from really being able to recognize that we are making wonderful progress. And we need to, again, continue to build on that. There's so many analogies that one can make to building, not only building bridges. The opportunity to talk with you today and the invitation, I've enjoyed it very much.
Thank you. When we were getting our speaker for today, we have been watching the news, and we had noticed this, we call it a little woman, but seems so very powerful. We also want to acknowledge her husband, Paul, being with us on today, so thank you so much for coming out. If you could just be patient with us for just a few more minutes. She talked about education. It is so important. And I think Lori Cornell mentioned about when they're so young and innocent. I can't finish this luncheon without mentioning a 4-year-old who was coming to the luncheon today, who was so very excited to be coming. And it's because in school they had told her that she didn't have school today because we were celebrating Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. So in her head, she thought that this was a party for Dr. King, and he was going to be here. And it was the cutest thing. And all day yesterday, she kept saying, I'm not going to school tomorrow because I'm going to Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. And then she came today and said, I'm just, I'm here because of Martin Luther King's birthday. He's going to be here. And she was so sweet. She was so seriously telling me, he's going to be here. And I thought, I don't think so. And her mother had to explain why he was not going to be here today. And Jan, little one. Truly, when we talk about doing things for education for our youth, it means so much when someone at 4 years old is so excited to be here and knowing what Dr. King represented. That's the reason why she wanted to come to. As you go forward, that you think of our theme. It's been a few tough months for us. Sent out the text and we were, highly upset. But today, all of you have made, I'm sure, each member of the community feel much better, your presence here today. So thank you so much for coming out. It just goes to show that not everybody feels that way. Sometimes you begin to believe it. You think everybody's like that. But seeing you here today makes us feel so much better. So thank you. We appreciate it, taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. For all of our students who could be at home, just relaxing or playing video games, being with us. We have one quick announcement that we want to make. Friday, April 20th, 2018 at 6 o'clock p.m., we will be having a program because, as it was mentioned earlier, it's 50 years since the assassination of Dr. King on April 4th, 1968. We will be having a program on that Friday night. You saw the video with Todd Curry. You were going to actually see some of us present that at Friendship Baptist Church Choir and Open Door Number 3 Church of God in Christ. Our choir, we were going to sing to you today. We were going to perform it for you, but we decided Todd was doing such a great job, we would let him do it. But we want to encourage you, put that on your calendar, come out and be with us on that Friday evening. We will be having a program, and immediately following, we will be having a soul food dinner. Tickets are only $1. They are $1 solely because we just need to have a number count so we can make sure we have enough food for each one of you. So we want you to come out and be with us on that day. We will let you know exactly where the place. There will be an announcement shortly. So we want to thank you again for that. We have just a couple minutes if you could listen. We have a guest with us. She came from Buffalo, from the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, and then she's going to come and speak to us because we're trying to start one here in Chautauqua County.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Black Trade Unionists. It is one of the largest union affiliates of the AFL-CIO, and in your county, they're trying to start a chapter, so there's going to be a meeting here in Dunkirk. So if anybody is interested, please meet us on the 1st. It is going to be held at the USWA Union Hall, 97 East 4th Street. So I'd love to see some of your faces on February 1st at 6 p.m. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And to our wonderful speaker, we truly enjoyed you on today. This time we're going to have Sergeant Terrain come forward for the retirement of the colors and followed by the benefit.
Mark time. March. Color. Halt. Left. Face. Freeze then. Arm.
Retire colors.
Thank you. Sergeant. Order. Arm. Carry. Colors. Oh.
Applause for those young people. Ago talked about my God's work, point where we're ready to have benediction. So if you could all join me in prayer for all things that we have experienced, all things, those wonderful words that came from us upon our minds, the need to strength and wisdom, saying we'll listen to those and we'll react and act so that we may better our communities, better our. And Lord, we're asking that you keep our eyes focused, and we're thanking you, gracious God, and give.
We must thank the Moose Lodge. I really want to give them a hand is because we have record numbers, and they allowed all of you latecomers to change the number. So we definitely